We're happy that you're here today to talk a little bit and have a conversation about assessment and feedback in general, but also specifically when you may be doing some online remote teaching and learning and where assessment fits into that picture. So we're going to go ahead and look at our outcomes that we're going to have today. So one is that we're hoping that you can reflect on the role of assessment and feedback in advancing students' language proficiency anytime, but now in particular in our current situation. And then that's the first part. I'm going to take that part. And then Cristin is going to give you a hands-on live demo of the learning site and how the learning site can be used to assess and provide feedback in a way that encourages proficiency growth in your students. So those are our two goals for today. So before we start talking about assessments and feedback, let's take a virtual look and see who is around the room here and find out a little bit about what's going on in your various situations. And I know that across the country, things are very different depending on where you're at, your school, your district, your state, etc. So let's get a little idea of where you're at. We're going to do just a quick little poll. And so it's going to pop up here in a second, and we're going to ask the question, what expectations are being communicated to you at this time regarding grading and assessment? So what are you being told, or what is the discussion in your area about assessment and grades during this time period? Is it only grades? I know there's some teachers that say you can only take 1 grade a week, or I need you to take 5 grades a week. There might be assessments, but no grades. There might be grades and assessments, maybe no grades, no assessments at all, that it's just not appropriate right now, or other. So there might be a circumstance that doesn't fit that. Feel free to put that in the question box if you want to give us some feedback or details about your current situation. I'm just going to give you a couple more seconds to kind of log in and put one of those answers to kind of see where we're at. And it looks like pretty much, hopefully we have, yeah, don't be afraid to use the other boxes or the question box as well. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to close that poll. And let's go ahead and share the results here and see what it says. So we've got, isn't that interesting? So we've got a grades only. We've got assessment, but no grades, grades and assessments, no grades or assessments. And this is why we're going to have hopefully a really good discussion day about this. I have someone who says we can assign whatever we want, but we're moving towards a pass incomplete, or so no letter grades in that respect. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing where you're at right now. All right, so let's go ahead and keep kind of taking a look. So when we did that poll, you might have thought to yourself, well, what's the difference? Like, why are we separating these out into two different things, assessments and grades? And often in our circumstances as teachers in the classroom, these things go together, right? We always think of these things having to go together, assessments and grades. But when we take a little closer look at this, we really can ask ourselves, what's the difference between assessments and grades? So think about that just for a few seconds. And do you have a clear definition in mind when you hear that word assessment versus grades? Do you have a difference between the two? So if you want to just take a second, and if you have some ideas of what the difference between those two are, go ahead and type them in the question box and just kind of we'll give an idea. What does it mean to assess versus what does it mean to grade? I'll give you a couple seconds and we'll see if we get any responses. What is the difference between assessment and grade?
Well, they're typing their answers in, Michelle. When you were in the classroom, did you think of those two things separately, or were they always connected for you?
I don't know that they were not, I think they were always connected, right? I think we're very conditioned with there having to be, unless it's assessment and very casual, a lot of times we are just automatically assuming that if we're going to assess something, we are going to put a grade on that. And so maybe you don't know the difference. So we're going to talk about that. So awesome.
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of times teachers think, at least I used to think as well, that the whole reason to give an assessment was so that I could give the students a grade.
Right, exactly. So I have a couple responses here. So let's just kind of read a few of these really quick. So for us, grades are completion of activities. Assessments are what students are able to do with the language. Okay, good. Assessments matter more to me to determine the proficiency level and ability. Grades matter more to students because they need to know what their GPA is, what their points are, what their percentages that they have. So that's a really interesting point, that we care about assessments and maybe students just care about the grades, right? Very good. Assessment equals like a dipstick, so a test, and then a grade assigns value to that assessment. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Those are some good observations. So we're going to look at those two things a little bit. So I was reading an interesting article about assessment and evaluation and grading, achievement, things like that. And one of the things that it came across there was that the word assessment comes from the Latin word assidere, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, which means to sit beside. So when that concept of that origin of that word, meaning when we assess, we're sitting with that person, we're sitting beside that student. And our goal is to gain information about what that student knows and is able to do. We're just getting information, okay? Assessment is something that we do with the students, is what that kind of original word kind of makes us think of. It's what we do with the students, not to the students. So we're getting a picture, we're taking a picture of what they can do and what they know in the language. So for an assessment, we really need, in order to assess a student, we really need to be clear about what we expect students to know and be able to do, right? And we have to make sure that they have the tools available to them to show what they know and they can do, right? And so that's one reason why you might be thinking, well, assessment right now is a little tricky because I don't know for sure if it's what they can do or not, or what they know or not, for example. And maybe you don't know what resources or tools there are out there to make sure that they are able to show what they know and they can do, right? So these are some things we're going to talk about, both the tools and the expectations. So we're going to look, there we go. I'm getting a little bit of an issue going on with my computer. All right. Cristin, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you see my screen anymore?
You see your PowerPoint with line. There you go. Now you're back.
Now it's back. Well, I have 3 monitors and 2 of them went out of commission at the same time. So I'm like, oh Lord. So that's a little bit just about assessment. So grades, on the other hand, grades are how we communicate to the outside world. So it's not just to the student, but it's to everybody else too, right? It's how we communicate what that student knows and can do based on our data collection systems, whatever those are, okay? So our grade book, however we collect all that information, they become a grade. So it's that outside world way to show everybody what it is. So during this time of, I don't think we've got a good name for it, right? COVID-19, remote teaching and learning, I don't know, crisis education, whatever we're doing here, there may be several reasons why you don't want, or you're being told not to take a grade, for example. So for some reasons might be unequal access. So students don't have all the, they don't have access to the same tools, or support varies among students. Perhaps it's the inability to ensure that that grade is really reflective of what the student knows and can do, because of a lot of other factors. There's a lot of other things going on right now, right? And in this current environment, it might be issues of academic integrity. So you don't know that that is the student that's doing the work, for example. So whether or not you give grades is really a debate, or it's not really, it's kind of a non-issue. You may not even have a choice, right? You might not even have an input in that decision. That might be made, you know, at the district or principal level. But regardless of whether or not there's a grade attached to it, I think we can agree that there is a need to assess students and to really help students understand, self-reflect, self-assess, and for us to give some feedback on what students are able to know and do, so that both you as a teacher and your students as learners know where they are, so that they can go a little bit further or maintain their language and cultural proficiency. So wherever you are at, we can't give feedback to students to get them to the next level if they don't know where they're at, for example, or just to kind of make it simple. So assessment is an important piece in this learning, whether or not it's graded or not. It's still an important piece of this puzzle when we're doing any sort of teaching, whether it's live and in person or whether it's online. So we're going to just look very, very briefly at the role of formative and summative assessment in advancing students' proficiency, and kind of talk about feedback just a little bit. And then Cristin's going to get you to the how you can use our learning site to do both of these things, to assess, maybe give grades, maybe not give grades on it, and to give feedback on students to help them keep moving, even if it's slower than what we would normally be in the classroom, but to kind of keep moving them a little bit further in their proficiency of their language. So let's take a really quick look. So of course we know that there's different types of assessment. We've got formative, summative, self-assessment. But when we're looking at it in this new context, I wanted to kind of put a different spin on it. So formative assessments are ongoing processes that guide, mentor, direct, and encourage student growth. Okay, so I love that way of thinking of assessment, especially right now, that it's not a punitive, evaluative sort of thing. We can kind of take that off that assessment, that stigma off of assessment, or whatever we want to call it. But it's really to guide and mentor and direct their growth. So it's used to improve student performance. It doesn't have to be formal. And we know that from in the classroom, right? It doesn't have to be formal, and online it doesn't have to be formal as well. Any task can be a formative assessment to take that snapshot of where they're going and give feedback, whole group or individually, to kind of help them do better, or to learn more, go a little bit deeper. And formative assessments guide teaching and the next step. I think for teachers in particular right now, it's really, I know it's very frustrating, because we're all the teachers are just kind of trying to figure things out, right? And it's hard in your classroom. You can do a quick assessment and you can see where everybody's at and how they're doing and kind of judge where to go next, right? That is so much harder now, but through little formative assessments, hopefully it will give you a little bit bigger picture, because now more than ever, you really have to adjust how you're teaching, what you're teaching, the speed you're teaching, the rate you're teaching, just because there's so many unique circumstances out there right now with your students. So you're not going to know whether you're giving them too much or giving them too little, or whatever you're doing, you're not going to know the right amount, the Goldilocks amount, just right, not too much, not too little, unless you do some smaller, maybe formative assessments, so that you
Michelle,
know.
I just wanted to add real quick that earlier today I was reading, I'm in a Facebook group called Standards-Based Learning and Grading, and there was a great post today on an article called How to Give Specific Timely Feedback. And so there was a lot of discussion about how much and when and why, etc. But someone had said that in one of their posts that learning is going to happen best when students are getting timely feedback on a regular basis, based on regular tasks and assignments, not necessarily waiting for those summative assessments to happen. So if we can think about giving them shorter pieces of feedback more often, I think that's going to help their growth more at this time with this type of learning, than waiting till the end to give them a ton of feedback on one piece of work. So little pieces along the way, I think, are what's going to be helpful.
Absolutely. I don't know, Cristin, if you knew that I taught virtual school for a couple of years, And one of the things that I always said was really that's when my best teaching was happening, was giving feedback on multiple assignments. So it wasn't just, that was part of my job as far as being a teacher. And so I know that can be an adjustment and kind of a change for teachers that are used to, you know, being in front of class and presenting and interacting with their students. And this is a little bit different way to interact with their students, but a very valuable and helpful one for students as well, for sure. Awesome. And again, so we do have summative assessments, although, and I guess this is what the reason I bring these up is which is appropriate, right now, and how should it be done in this kind of unique circumstances that we're going through, right? So again, the summative, that process of evaluating what a student has learned at the end of a given period of time. So do you want to assess them at the end of the week, give them a bunch of little assignments and some feedback, and then see, is it effective? What is their proficiency level? What is their ability? What are their skills or whatever at the end of a period of time? It's really to tell how well the student and the content was absorbed and retained by individual students, not the whole class, but individual students. How well do they remember that content and how well did they understand it, right? It gives insights to how well they've mastered it. And, you know, benchmark assessments, those are the things we're used to doing in class. Is there a role for a summative assessment during remote learning? There could be, right? We don't know. We're not going to, you're all, I assume most of you, just like when I started virtual school, you're new at this, right? So you don't necessarily know what is the most effective way to present. This is, again, where this is the summative assessment maybe shouldn't have a grade attached for the student, but it might give you as the teacher some valuable insight of how you're teaching and how students, how well they're absorbing what you are giving them. Maybe not. So there's the kind of the formative and the summative assessments. So performance assessments, of course, is really what, you know, Wayside and what proficiency-based instruction, we're really looking at performance, what they can do with the language, right, and showcasing that. So when we look at performance assessments in an online environment, they can, typically in the classroom, you're probably using the performance assessment as a summative assessment. But in these new circumstances, you might really want to look at using performance assessments as a formative tool to give feedback and help students grow. So even though in the Wayside resources or maybe in your curriculum, it has the IPA, the Integrated Performance Assessment, at the end of the unit, well, things have changed, right? So that may not be an appropriate end of unit summative assessment anymore. And you might want to take pieces of that or use it as an formative assessment to just kind of see where they're going and to give some good feedback. Just really briefly, when we're looking at assessments and you're looking at different types of assessments, when you're looking at performance assessments in our, you know, in our discipline or in what we're doing, our profession, there's some real strong reasons to use it even in an online environment. In this current kind of teaching and learning, remember that performance assessments kind of automatically differentiate based on where students are with those proficiency levels. And you can really, you know, again, if you don't have to worry about, you know, grading them, but it can also really just calibrate where they're at, and you can move things down. And yeah, they normally would be a novice high, but wow, there is a lot of stuff going on. And so really, I'm gonna be happy if they're a novice mid. So we can kind of play around with some things there when they're in, just to see what kind of output they're doing. A lot of teachers I've heard online are very concerned about academic integrity, which is a virtual school tool, again, for cheating, right? So academic integrity, using translators, things like that. Performance assessments are pretty hard to Google, right? Using Google Translate. It really is more open-ended and is more an indication. It can be personalized. It's personalized by the students, so it's a little more, it's less tempting for students, let's say, to take some shortcuts, okay? And we still want to remember that our goals are still the same. They may not be, our big goals are still the same. We want students to be able to use the language, right? And we want to stay focused on their language proficiency with the understanding they're not going to maybe be the same as they were before, but performance assessment still keeps us on track of our expectations for students to use the language, to see what students can do with the language. So we don't just give them a bunch of busy work that isn't related to a larger proficiency-based goal. Okay. So the last thing that I just wanted to touch base on really quickly was then feedback. We've mentioned this a couple times now, Cristin and I, and the role of feedback, especially in an online environment, really is crucial. You would be surprised, well, you wouldn't be surprised, I know you wouldn't, but how much feedback we give students when they're sitting in front of us in class, right? When they're sitting in front of us, we can just give them a nod, give them a little correction, give them a little support, give them a little interaction and guide them. And they still need that guidance from you. This time it's just going to be written, or it might be a video, it could be a little audio or something like that. And Cristin's going to show you how on the learning site you can give a variety of modalities in your feedback and not just writing all the time. And so feedback, we just want to keep in mind, we want it to be timely and ongoing. So like Cristin said, that's going to be something we can get it back to them as soon as possible, even just little tips and hints and a little bit of feedback. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to write a novel telling them what to do or give them feedback. But the more small circumstances you can do that, the better. Give specific guidance to improve. Okay, so again, this is your avenue to help teach them a little bit. Maybe include a resource that they could look at to help them. Focus on the process and not only the results. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples of this in a minute. And then it's targeted to the specific task. Okay, we don't have to bring in everything we wanted to, give them corrective feedback in everything they say, but based on the goals of the actual task is what we would discuss. Mm-hmm. So in the handouts tab, we put a couple handouts in there, and I wanted to kind of walk through those with you. And these are for you to take, print out. I think you're going to find them very, very helpful. So one of them is an activity that was off of a blog post, and the link is there to give credit to that. And these are some tips for you. So tie your feedback to a specific learning goal. Again, don't get bogged down like you have to correct every little thing. You don't have to. Just, whatever the goal is, whatever the can-do statements, just focus and come in on that. Try to mention at least one way that the student is meeting the target. Okay. Effective use of connector words is a good example. So something that they did good. Focus on both the task and the process. Okay, so not just the results. Their language, they might have just where they did address the issues, give them credit for that. Don't let tiny little things take away from their overall meaning in their thought process, etc. It's good to ask questions. If there's a way that they can answer you back, that's even better. But at least ask one question just to stimulate their thinking about their work. So how could have you maybe added more variety of adjectives to that, or described yourself in different ways, or whatever it might be. Give them some kind of questions to stimulate their thinking. And then very concrete, because remember, this is how they're more than likely going to be learning kind of in this asynchronous environment. If you have them, give them some concrete suggestions or links or tutorials or, different ways that you can get them to that next kind of step, that next level to get them to improve. So that's one of the handouts. The other one is this one based on the Apple score descriptors from Actful, and this is a really great one too. So these are different strategy ideas for feedback. Based on, you'll notice this one I put up here on the screen is just on interpretive tasks, and actually give you some great advice specific to the proficiency level. So if you're looking at that intermediate low level, use what you already know about a topic for additional clues about what the author wants you to understand. Then go back, reread, re-listen, and get more information. That's very specific to that proficiency level, right? So that document you can download also, and it also goes into personal tasks and things that you can do to improve, to help the student improve their proficiency. So those are two different documents that we wanted you to have to be able to look at, print out as you're giving feedback to your students. So other things to consider.
Can I bring up something real quick, Michelle?
Absolutely.
In that Facebook group that I mentioned earlier, the Standards-Based Learning and Grading Facebook conversation I was reading today, there were a lot of questions about, but I have 120, 150, 210. One teacher had 210 students, and she asked, well, how am I supposed to give them all feedback? 210 students at once. And a teacher gave a really well thought out response, but he quoted someone else, and he didn't remember who this quote was from, so I don't know who it's from either. But he said, if you can't give accurate descriptive feedback to all your students, then perhaps your assessment is too long. And that might be good food for thought right now when we're trying to figure out how to do all this assessment online. Like you said earlier, maybe we don't do the whole integrated performance assessment. That would be a lot of 3 different tasks for 210 students. That's a lot of different feedback. But if we look at just one task to assess them on, maybe that would make it more doable. Maybe then we could give that descriptive feedback to each student. Just a little something I wanted to add before we move on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Another just little tip or trick as a virtual school teacher, one thing that I did is, students of a typical proficiency level tend to make similar, have similar issues or similar things. Maybe they don't expand on the vocabulary, they don't have the depth, or they don't have those connector words, or, there's some things that you're going to see in lots of different students. And so a lot of times, one of the things that we would do as virtual school teachers, because I had 300 students that I had to give feedback on, and that was a good portion of what I did. But we would keep a Word document, and we would just have, like, so when I come and I have, really great job. You really were descriptive in how you described your family. However, could have you added maybe 2 more different adjectives, or, use some different something, or, so give that little kind of generic but specific advice. I don't know if that makes sense. So it is generic, but it's also something that a lot of students are going to make the same error on. And you keep a Word document of that, and you do a lot of copying and pasting, and then customizing it to that specific student's work. And so that's just another quick tip to help you, kind of do that feedback and have it both be meaningful and personable, personable. But still not kill yourself trying to grade and to give feedback on all of these sort of things.
Yeah, a teacher mentioned doing something like that as well. A couple said that they had a document, just like you said, they kept it in their Google Notes, I think they said they used, but you could use a Word document like you suggested. And they had numbered comments. They said after you've graded a few, you kind of know what types of comments you're going to be making to everybody. And so they had numbered comments, and they shared those numbered comments with the students. So they would just have to put 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever comment they were referring to. Students could refer to the sheet, and then they could use their time to type other more personalized comments to the students.
It's great. And then even if we're looking at feedback as a way to improve and move those students further, you can also, have specific references and say, go back to X page in the flex text and look at the vocabulary one more time. Was there any of those other words that maybe you could have brought in? So you can, you can add those kind of, resources as well. That you can just kind of pass on, or watch this video, watch this video again a couple times and see if you get some more ideas of how you could connect these sentences in a different way, something like that. Awesome, thank you. So other things, and Cristin, it sounds like that group that you're in has some really great ideas. So other things that we were thinking about, and we've already mentioned this, is really breaking things down into smaller chunks, mini assessments, whether they're formative, whether they're self-assessments, completed in a shorter amount of time may be more effective than some big summative assessments, right? And it's also respectful for students who, we don't know their circumstances at home. We don't know how often they can get on a computer in order to complete something. Maybe they can get in 15-minute chunks, and then they share the computer with their sibling the rest of the time. Who knows? So smaller, more manageable, littler chunks of learning and assessment kind of go hand in hand. The other thing is, I learned this when I taught in virtual school, you cannot control what resources the students are using during assessments. You just can't. That's just the reality of it. So there's a couple things that, from my experience, I wanted to just mention. one is to really have a talk to them about academic integrity and the fact that, you know, you're here to really help them grow in the language and in their interculturality, and that you can all agree that that's the goal, and really talk to them about how that can't happen if it's not their work that you're turning in. On the topic of academic integrity, honestly, what I found is a lot of students end up using Google Translate because they're overwhelmed and can't do what you've asked them to do a lot of the times. So either they're very busy and they're stressed and they can't, you know, do it as far as time-wise or ability-wise. And that's usually, it's most of the time it's an act of kind of a little bit of desperation. So during this kind of really trying time, we want to give them opportunities to show what they can do and know, talk to them about academic integrity, perhaps take away the motivation for cheating by letting them use their notes and other resources and just giving them feedbacks and making sure they understand that, you know, and maybe decoupling that grade aspect from it, right? Of, you know, not having that pressure of getting a good grade, and just say, I just want to see what you know and what you can do so that we can, wherever you're at, we can keep pushing you a little bit farther, right? And another strategy is to allow for multiple attempts to master content. So that's just another kind of hint. Really, we want to focus on our most critical content, and so therefore we want to make sure that's what we're assessing as well. So we might have to let go some of those little things in order to really get a big picture of where they're at when they're going to do that. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, again, that grade. If you do have to give grades, and really asking yourself, is this grade a true reflection of what this student knows and can do, or does it really reflect that student's current situation? And so, you know, I kind of encourage you to look at that very closely, because there are some, you know, obviously a lot going on that's adding stress to us and stress to students, et cetera. And so how can you make your mini assessments low stakes and give feedback and really make sure that it's what the student knows and can do that they're actually creating? This time that we have away from the classroom, which is not a good thing for most of us. Teachers would not consider that a good thing, but it gives us time maybe to think a little bit and re-examine what your view of assessment is, what your students' view of assessment is, and maybe think outside the box and think a little bit differently. And if you're not mandated to give grades and to give assessments, you can change your mindset and your students' mindset into what the purpose of those assessments are. And so that's why we really wanted this webinar on how assessment is used to move students forward in their proficiency and to give feedback for that reason. So we want to make sure that we measure what matters and help students kind of move forward as they go. Cristin, do you have anything else to add that you've seen or been hearing on some of the websites and different things you've been on?
I don't think so, not right now. Just ready to get into the learning site.
Awesome. And I just wanted to check. I think we're good. And if we don't have any questions right now, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Cristin's going to give you now some real nuts and bolts of what you can do with the learning site in regards to assessment and feedback.
Okay, so for some of you, this may be a review if you've been really using the learning site to its fullest potential in your classroom already. And for others who haven't been using the learning site, this may give you a few tips on how to implement it now. If you could click on the next slide real quick, Michelle. So what we're going to be looking at right now is, where do we find all these performance-based tasks, whether they're formative or summative, in the learning site, and then how to assign them so that our students can do them. One thing you may not have seen before is, what does it look like when your students actually are completing those assignments? How do they see them? How do they complete them? How do they submit them? So we will go into a student view and look at that. And then we'll go back to the teacher view and look at, well, now that they've submitted their work, how do we give feedback on it, using some of those tips that Michelle talked about earlier. And then we're going to spend the last few minutes looking at the portfolio and talking about, well, maybe now is a good time to get students to do some self-assessment and use that online portfolio that we have in the learning site to help them do that. So Michelle, if you would give me control so I can show my learning site screen. Wonderful. So I think you all are seeing my dashboard right now. Is that what you're seeing, Michelle?
I sure am.
Great. Okay, so I'm in as a teacher. Molly is my teacher account. And when you log in, this is what you see. I'm going to just start off in the French book because most of what I'll be showing will be in the Spanish book since I was a Spanish teacher. But just to show where some of the tasks are, let's go into the French course. And we're going to go right into the flex text. So I'm going to click over here where it says flex text. And I'm just going to go into the student edition. The great thing with the flex text is it opens up to whatever page I was on last. And obviously I was on Unit 4 last on vocabulary, looking at food, which makes my stomach growl. I'm a little hungry right now. So for the Javance, or for the French book, the Javance section is the formative assessment. Okay, so the formative assessments that we have in both the French and the Spanish series have different performance-based tasks in the different modes of communication for your students to complete that are related to the topics they have just learned about. So here we can see in this Javance, there is an interpretive reading, and we can tell that by the icon here. For step 1, it's an interpretive reading task. Step 2 is going to be interpersonal communication. So we'll have students having a little conversation. And then in step 3, with the pen and paper, that would be a presentational writing task. So you can always tell what mode of communication it's going to be by the icon. The great thing here is also that you can see the can-do statements that relate with those tasks so that students can self-assess after they've done the task how well they think they did on those. So these are our official formative assessments. In French, it's called Javance. In the Spanish book, they're called En Camino. However, Michelle mentioned that it doesn't have to be a formal task to be a formative assessment. So for example, if we were to go back to that conditon section, the vocabulary, we're going to notice that there are different tasks and activities throughout the unit that could be little mini formative assessments as well. So you don't have to only assess using the Javance or the En Camino. Any task, any activity could be used as a formative assessment to give feedback on. So here, for example, we have that interpretive reading. If you scroll through a little bit, we have interpretive listening. Here's another interpersonal task. So there's lots of different options to choose from for your tasks. The summative assessments that we talked about at the end of Michelle's part of the webinar, in French are called J'arrive, and in Spanish are called Vive entre culturas. And these also have 3 different tasks in the different modes of communication. The difference between these tasks and the ones we just saw in the Javance are that these are interconnected so that they kind of build off of each other. The Javance ones are more easily able to be used separately as individual tasks. Whereas when you use the tasks in this integrated performance assessment, you kind of have to do the interpretive task before you do the interpersonal, before you do the presentational, because they all build off of each other. So I just wanted to quick show you in the textbook where to find those different types of tasks. Basically, anywhere in the textbook is where you can find those tasks, right? Because it could be an activity from anywhere in the Comme dit-on or Décrivons vocabulary and grammar sections. It could be from the Javance formative assessment section, or it could be one of these tasks here on the summative J'arrive. So I'm going to quickly go to the Spanish and show you one more spot for Spanish teachers to find some great tasks. It's a little different in the French book. The French series doesn't have this, but for the Spanish teachers, if you go to Recursos, there's a folder called Solo para Profesores. And in there, that first folder is called Midterm and Final Exam Materials. In there, you're going to find tasks for the midterm and the final exam. These tasks are performance-based tasks in the different modes of communication. The midterm materials cover units 1 through 3, And the final exam materials cover units 4, 5, and 6. So let's just go into the final exam materials. And you're going to see that for each unit, there is the mode of communication and the type of task. So here for unit 4, we have an interpersonal speaking task, an interpersonal writing task, an interpretive reading, a presentational writing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different tasks to choose from that go along with the theme of unit 4. If you notice, some say SE and some say TE. The SE is the student version of the PDF, and the TE is the teacher version, so it has the answers or other suggestions for giving it. So let's just look at one, for example. Let's look at the presentational writing assessment. So if you click on it, it is a PDF. And so you're going to see it has a little menu up there, and then you're writing a review about that menu. On these PDFs, students can actually download it. If you can see up in the right-hand corner of my screen, there's a little download button. Students download it, save it to their desktop, their Google Classroom folder, wherever they save their school documents. They download it, save it in a name that they're going to recognize, maybe their name plus writing assessment 2 or whatever you want to call it. And then they can go in and they can type in this document. Once they have written their presentational writing task, they save it, and then they can submit it electronically, however they submit documents to you normally, whether that's via email or via your LMS, such as submitting it through Google Classrooms or Schoology or something like that. So that's how those PDF tasks are going to work. So they all have the task explained to them in the PDF. Let's go back to how to assign these then. So we've kind of looked at where these assessments or tasks, not necessarily assessments, tasks that can be used for assessments are located. So for example, if you want to assign one of these to your students, if you want to assign that presentational writing assessment we did, all you have to do is click that assign button. And you're going to have an option to choose all of your classes at once. So if you teach more than one class of level 1 Spanish, for example, you'll have all your classes up there and you can assign it to all your classes at once. I only have one class in here, so I'm just seeing one class, but I can select that class and select all the students in that class. Or if this task is an assessment just for certain students, maybe today I'm only going to assign it to 3 students. I'll assign it to the other 2 students in my class tomorrow, because I want their time back to be received by them in a timely manner. And I know I'm not going to have time to give feedback to all those students tonight. So maybe I'm just going to assign it to some today, and maybe I'll assign it to other students tomorrow. Or you can just assign it to everybody. And then you go ahead and put in your due date and time and click assign. And then students get a notification. And when we go to the students view, I'll show you where they see those notifications and how they respond to them. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Also notice there's a share button. So if you're using Google Classrooms, which I am not connected to, but if I were, I could click share, then click on Google Classroom, and it's very easy to use if you are familiar with Google Classroom. So that's one way to assign these materials. But what about if you want to assign one of the activities that we were looking at? So for example, let me go to, let's go to Unit 5. Let's look at the In Camino. That's our formative assessment. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go to the textbook to do this first. So I'm going to do the flex text, Unit 5. I'm going to look at the In Camino. Okay, so let's say I want to do this interpretive viewing task for an assessment. I want to see how well they are able to understand videos of native speakers when they're watching them. So I can go to the textbook. When I see this icon, this green compass icon, that tells me there are resources online for this particular task. The great thing about being in the flex text is if I click on it, I can see my different options. The quiz is the actual online version of this activity. This paper document, like we just saw, means it's a PDF if I want them to complete it on a PDF document and submit that electronically to me. And here's the file for the video. So I can go in and watch the video from the content tab or right here from this viewer. So I'm just going to go into this quiz activity. I want to see what this activity is going to look like. So I'm going to click on it, and you'll notice it takes me out of the flex text to the content tab. That content tab is where all of those resources are located. And so I can do a couple different things. I can preview this activity, and in preview, it's not interactive, but I can see what the activity is going to be. I can see what type of activity it is. I can watch the video if I want.
Hay 4 cosas que me encantan hacer.
So I could watch the videos or preview them. I see the questions, and this box here tells me the students are going to be typing an answer. That's a text box, so I know that it's going to be a longer response type of question for them. Okay, so I can either, if I said, yes, that's what I want to do, I can go to assign. And once again, it's just like what we saw earlier. I have already assigned this particular one to my students, but I'd be able to select all students, click next step, and choose the due dates. But let's say, you know what, I'm not sure yet. I see it, but I want to know what my students are going to experience when they actually do that activity. Then I can click attempt. In attempt, it's going to tell me what my settings are. And I can actually do this activity as a student. So I can watch the video. It says Alejandra from Quito, Ecuador, and Isaac from Costa Rica are talking about their favorite pastimes. Watch and listen to the video and write the information that each one gives. You can watch the video more than once. The great thing is students have control of that video, so they can stop, rewind, and watch it as many times as they need to make sure they understand the information. The question they're trying to answer is, what do the bloggers do to have fun? And so as they're watching, they're going to type their notes down here. So that's question 1. Scrolling down to question 2, after listening to Alejandra and Isaac answer these questions, so now I'm going to answer those 3 specific questions. So it goes from tell me what you understood to, did you understand this specific information? When they're all done, they click submit, and then you will be able to go in and give them feedback, and we'll look at how to do that in just a moment. So let's say we did that, we tried the activity, and now, yeah, we like it. We think that's going to be a good one to show us what our students can do and give them some feedback and where they're at. So I can go ahead and assign that from here as well. So you have lots of different options of how to assign an assignment, and they all work the same. If I click assign, I'm going to get my student list, click next step, and add the due date. Okay, so now that let me go to my assignment tab. So under assignments, I can see everything that I have assigned to my students. So I can look at that in a calendar view, and I can see I have some things assigned here for my students for today and the next couple days coming. So I want to show you what those look like when a student completes them. We can go back to my list view, and let's look at this one here. Vive entre culturas, mi familia, un álbum de fotos. So I can click on students to see who has submitted, and so far Kevin is the only one who submitted it. So let's go ahead and look at his response. So I click on his assignment, I click on it again, and I see there was only one question that he had to answer. So let's look at it. And his topic was, you have decided to participate in the summer exchange with Jael. Create a digital album to share information and photographs about your own family and home to make her feel comfortable when she visits. So this is what he submitted. He added some images to his text. He wrote a sentence or 2 about each picture. You can see he talked about his family and his home, just as the prompt suggested. And when he submitted it, the teacher gave him feedback. That's what all this highlight is. Those are all comments from his teacher. So for example, here he wrote, es especial tiempo pasamos juntos. He was trying to say it's a special time when we are together, or something to that effect he was trying to say. So the teacher said, in Spanish, which comes first, the describing word or the word it's describing? Notice how the teacher didn't give him the answer and say, oh, remember it's tiempo especial. Instead, the feedback got the student thinking, like Michelle had suggested. Ask a question to get them thinking and see if they can come up with the response. Here, mi mama, or he wrote mi mama. Accents can change the meaning of words sometimes, so just a little reminder. Here with gusta, what small word has to go before gusta when you want to say that she likes something? So just little different feedbacks that were given throughout. Those are specific corrective feedback. You probably don't want to overwhelm your students or yourself by trying to correct everything in the writing. Choose one or two things to comment on that are important, and then move on. Don't try to correct everything, because that's going to take way too long and be too overwhelming for your students. At the end, the teacher was able to put in a grade and then did some overall comment feedback. And it says, overall, you completed the task, but I'd like to see you add a few more details for each picture. What else can you say about your family members and your house? So if they want to redo it to get a better grade, they can think about those questions and add to their descriptions. She also used some language from the rubric. So we have rubrics. I'll show you where those are in just a second. We have rubrics online that you can use to help give your feedback. And what the teacher did here was just copy and pasted the words from the rubrics. Our rubrics aren't interactive online, so you can't complete the rubric and show your student your version of the completed rubric. But you can easily copy and paste the proficiency levels from the different domains in your rubric here. So here we were looking at 3 different domains, and we told the student they were at novice mid, novice high, and novice high in 3 different domains. So I'll show you what I did with that when we go to correct the student's work in just a minute. If you have any questions as we're going on, do type your questions in that question panel. And I see a couple right now. So it says, what about being able to play the audio from the Triángulo Aprobado CD? Is it possible to access in some way from a website? If you have an online account for Triángulo Aprobado, you will be able to listen to those audios online. If you you can always contact your account manager to get more information on that. And if you don't know who your account manager is, we can help you with that. We'll be giving you a email address to at the end of the webinar today, so that you can contact us and we can help you find your account manager to get that information. And the other question, someone has a demo account for their school right now. So if your demo account includes student accounts, then you can most definitely use these activities. You can still use the activities with the teacher account, but your students wouldn't have access to go in and complete them if you don't have, if your students don't have accounts at this point. So what we're showing you now is if you do have, if you and both you and your students do have access to the website at this point. Michelle, if you could do me a favor, and if any other questions come up while I am going through the rest of the learning site part of this webinar, if you could just let me know what those questions and we can get those answered as they come up, okay?
I've been typing some in the text box as well. So either way, we'll get it. Sounds good.
Good. So now I've changed screens here. It looks just like the last one, so you probably can't tell I changed screens. But now I'm in Catherine Campbell's account. Catherine is a student, okay? So this is what your students see when they log in. It looks just like yours. Most of it is going to be exactly the same. Notice next to Catherine's name, she has a bell. That's her notifications. That's where she knows when you've assigned something new. So I can click here and I can see there was an assignment due date change. Here on 4/16, there was an assignment that was given, etc. Okay, so students can see their new notifications there, and they can also just go into their textbook. Let me do that real quick. And when they have new notifications, there is an exclamation point here by the assignments. So I can click on here and notice the student's view comes up as the calendar. And so she can see, oh, I have this due today. That's that video blog that we, so it's a video blog. If she wants to attempt it, she just clicks attempt and it's going to open up for her. So this is a speaking activity for her. So let's look at how students would complete a speaking activity real quick. So they are going to create a video, and here it could be an audio or a video. You can either tell them which one to do or let them choose. And they're going to give a greeting, their name, their age, where they're from, etc. So let's just go ahead, and I'm just going to do an audio. I think that works better during a webinar. And all they have to do is click start audio recording. And they may get this message that says, oh, we want to use your microphone. They do need to hit allow to let their microphone be accessed so that they can be recorded. So I'm going to hit allow. And now we can see it's blinking, so it is recording. So the student would say, hola, yo soy Cristin, yo tengo 15 años, yo soy de St. Clair, Minnesota, yo hablo inglés, blah, 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 blah. So they do the recording, and when they're done, all they have to do is hit stop. Then if they want to listen to it to make sure they're happy with the recording. And now we can see it's blinking, so it is recording. So the student would say, hola, yo soy Cristin. So they can preview it, however you want to say it, make sure they're happy with it. And if they're not, they just click start audio recording again. A box will come up and say, are you sure you already responded to this? You want to replace it? They can click OK or cancel. I'm going to cancel because I'm happy with that, and I'm going to submit it. Yes, I really want to submit it. And so now she has submitted it to the teacher. So let's go back to our teacher now. I'm going to refresh my page. And notice I have a new notification. So Molly, my teacher, just got a notification saying Catherine just submitted her premiere video blog from page 81. I can click on that attempt link to go to it, or I can go to assignments and get to it from there. It's easiest if I just click on attempt. I click on attempt, and now I can see her submission. I get the prompt that she spoke to, and I can see her answer. And now we can see it's blinking, so it is recording. So the student would say, hola, yo soy. So as I'm listening to her recording, I can click this button that says add a comment. At any point, I want to add a comment. Soy Cristin, yo tengo. So right there, let's say that she said something and I want to leave a comment. I'm just going to write some gibberish right now. But that comment would be about whatever she said at 7 seconds into the recording. That's one of the great aspects of this feedback feature, is that students know exactly what this comment refers to, because that timestamp will be visible to the students. So they know that whatever feedback I gave them here refers to whatever they said at 7 seconds in. I can continue playing. Recording, when they're done, all they have to do is I can click add a comment again. I can add as many comments as I want throughout this activity. And this one at 10 seconds in, I'm going to do an oral comment instead. So I'm going to leave a voice comment. And so over here at the far right-hand side, there's that microphone. I'm just going to click on that and it'll turn red and it will be recording what I say. So now we can tell it's recording. It tells me, and the microphone is red. And so I can leave a voice comment. It's great for modeling how to say something, pronunciation feedback. And sometimes it's just easier to speak your feedback instead of trying to type it out for students. So you leave that feedback, you click the microphone to stop recording. And now when students get the feedback, they click on play. Let's say I have my grading system, and according to my grading system, her speaking was a 90%, so I could type that in. Michelle talked about using a document to type your answers from. So for example, let me show here. Oh no, what did I do? Well, here I'll show you. So here are the language from the rubrics that we have that's copy and pasted. So this is for presentational writing. I have here interpretive, etc. Let me show you where I got that feedback from. So in the resource folder, we have rubrics. And I use the analytic growth rubrics. So for this one, it's presentational speaking. So I can click on speaking rubric. And here, what language words do I use? How do I use language? How well am I understood? I can choose 1, 2, 3, all, or as few of those domains as I want. And what I did, if you'll notice, was here for presentational writing, for example, I took 3 domains and I just copied and pasted what novice low was, what novice mid was, what novice high was, and what intermediate low was. That way, when I am grading my activity, let's go back to the assignments, and I was grading this one. Oops, I need to go to the teacher account. When I go back to the assignments here, I can go ahead and copy and paste from that document really easy. Let's say, oh, if this were presentational speaking, not writing, but let's say, oh, novice high is our target, and she did that really well. I can just copy and paste that comment into my rubric for her there. It's a really easy way to give proficiency-based feedback. Up here, I'm giving more specific corrective feedback. Down here in the comment, I'm giving more proficiency-based feedback. So I can click save.
Hey, Cristin, we had a really quick question.
Yep.
Why did you copy the rubric into a Word document and not straight from PDF of the rubric itself? Is there a good reason?
Yeah, there is, because I first tried to do that, and you can copy and paste. So let me show you. Like right now, I'll copy and paste it. I'll just do a Control-C. Let me go to my document. And when I paste it into my document, well, actually not my document. Let me paste it into, well, here, let me explain it. I think it'll be easier. It pasted it in this format. So it did not paste it all in one line. So in the comment section where I copied and pasted it to for the students, it copied and pasted like this. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Yeah, the format wise, it just doesn't look as clean or as nice, I assume. And
yeah. And then I have my document. I have my document here with all my different rubrics on it. So instead of going in, opening up the rubric each time, I have one document that I can have, and it's all there.
Yeah, less back and forth.
Kind of my thinking.
Awesome. We had a couple other comments that I wanted to let you know. One was just what a great option that is to put your feedback right in the middle of the recording. Students don't always want to wait to the end, or as a teacher, you don't want to necessarily wait to the end after they've said 10 things and then go back and say, oh yeah, remember in the beginning when you said this? So that was, somebody pointed out what a great option that was. And then just that tip about the comments and copying and pasting those in there was a really great tip that this teacher appreciated. So I just wanted to pass those on.
Good. Well, I just have a few more things to show here. So now I'm back in my student account, and notice Catherine has a new comment. It said 5 up here until I clicked it. Now it's back down to 4. And it says your attempt for your quiz Vivente de Culturas Mi Primer Video Blog was evaluated by your teacher. So she knows I've gone in and given her feedback. So she just clicks on attempt, and she clicks on her question, and here it is. She can listen to it. to see what she said at 7.
And now we can see it's blinking, so it is recording.
So she can listen to 7 seconds and see what this refers to. She can click play.
So now we can tell it's recording.
And she can hear that feedback I gave her. She sees her grade and she sees what I copied and pasted from the rubric right there. So that's how you can do a speaking assessment online using our learning site and the tools we have for feedback. Let's look at how students complete the writing one real quick, just like we saw that blog example earlier. So I'm going to go back to her assignments, and I guess I will just do the same one that we saw earlier. So they're making a digital photo album to share information and photographs about their family. This works pretty much like a Microsoft Word document. You can do some basic formatting, bolding, italicize, underlining, indentation, bullet points, colors here if they don't know how to do accents, like if they're using a Chromebook, they can add their accents here. If they have a Mac, they can just type them as they normally do and they appear. So for example, let's say they need to find a picture. I like to recommend my students go to pixabay.com to find pictures. And let's say I just need a picture of a sister. Okay, and let's say I like this one. I'm going to copy and paste. Pixabay, by the way, are royalty-free images. We can use them without violating copyright laws. So that's why I like using Pixabay and having my students use Pixabay to find their images. That way we're not violating any copyrights. So I'm just going to do a copy image here, go back to my Word box, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that image in. There we have it. I can resize it if I want to make it a little bit smaller. And I can type about mi hermana menor es muy linda, blah, 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 blah. I can type my whole digital photo album right here. I can continue to add pictures of the rest of my family as well. If I want to use real pictures of my family, or if you want your students to use real pictures, they can obviously add those as well. It doesn't have to be a make-believe family, but it definitely can be. Students can also use this button called Add File. So if you want it to look a little bit nicer, have it more as an official artifact, you could have them create this photo album in PowerPoint or in some other software. They save that file and then they click Add File. They navigate to wherever that is saved on their desktop. And then you will be able to see it in the learning site and give feedback on it in the learning site as well. So let's say the student has completed this. They click Submit. Yep, we're ready for it. And so let's go back to the teacher. That's not the teacher account. Let's go back to the teacher one here. I need to refresh my page, so give me a second to do that. And notice when your student submits something, you're going to get this notification. I have one new notification, and it says Catherine Campbell just submitted her Vive Entre Culturas. I can click Attempt to get to it. And here it is. So this is where I can highlight any word or phrase that I want. I can color code it. I can type my comment. I hit save, and I can do that as many times throughout the writing as I feel necessary, however much corrective feedback I want to give. And remember those things that Michelle talked about when giving feedback. You look back at those handouts we have for you on the control panel and use those to help give some ideas of how to give feedback. Down here, I will grade according to whoever I would normally grade this piece of work. And then I can go back to my rubric document. Maybe I'm only going to look at this domain. Okay, only how do I use language? And she did, I can copy and paste that into there for her, save it, and now she gets that notification saying she has received her grade. So that is not so quickly, but kind of quickly, how to give feedback. Michelle, are there any questions about how to give feedback before we look at the last piece of the student portfolio?
No, the next question is about the student portfolio, so that's the perfect segue.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my student accounts. Let me close these tabs. When your students are in their learning site, they will see, and you will see in this green bar where it says portfolio. All students have to do is click on it and choose the book that they want to go into the portfolio for. Chances are your students are only going to have one book to choose from. They might have two if they've been using Entre Culturas for a couple years at your school, but they will click on the book that they want to go into the portfolio for. And they're going to see a list of all the can-do statements. The default is showing all of them. That's kind of overwhelming, so students may want to filter on the can-do statements. You can show them by results, so just the ones they've completed or just the ones they haven't completed that they still need to do. They can show by category, so just the intercultural can-do statements or the communicative can-do statements. And then by unit. And I think this one is probably the most helpful. So if you want to have your students do some self-assessment in the portfolio, and that is the main purpose of our portfolio, is to give students a chance to really reflect on their own learning and think about how they're doing. How is their language proficiency growing? It's not to be used for grading purposes. There is no grade attached to the portfolio. You can go in and give feedback as a teacher, but you can't give grades on it. And I think right now, it's important to help students kind of reflect on their learning so that they understand that even though they are at home, that learning is still happening. They are still growing. So let's say you are currently in Unit 4. So I can look at just the can-do statements for Unit 4, for example. Let's look at, I don't know, this one here. I can talk about what I eat at different meals and what time I eat them. So maybe we want students to go ahead and complete this can-do statement. All they have to do that is click on it. And there are 3 parts that they need to complete. The first one is they choose their progress level. So they're going to decide, how well can I do this? Am I really struggling? I can't really do this at all. Maybe I can like say, cereal y pizza, me gusta, you know, noche. They're kind of struggling with that right now. So maybe they would rank themselves a 1. 2 bars means, you know, I can do it, but I have to look at my notes maybe, or maybe I have to reference that vocab list at the back of the unit. But I need some kind of support to help me do it, but I can sort of do it. And then 3 bars means I can do this independently. I understand this concept. I'm good at it. I feel like I am good to go. So they're going to choose where they're at. If they choose a 2 for now, they can always go back later once they've learned more on that topic and change their proficiency level to 3. Or if they choose 1, they can move it to 2 and then 3, or from 1 to 3. They can always go back and change it. So that's the first part, choosing how their progress level. Next, they're going to upload evidence, and there are various ways to upload evidence. First, they can upload a file, any kind of outside file. So a Word doc that they wrote a paragraph in, could be a PowerPoint they created for a project. It could be a video they made. They could upload any type of file. And to do that, they just need to click Add File and navigate to what they want to add. So maybe they want to add, let's say this is something they created. And you're going to see it's attaching down here at the bottom. Okay. Hopefully it doesn't take, it's kind of a big file. I probably should have chosen a smaller one. We'll see what happens with that. They could also do an audio or a video recording, just like they did in that assignment we just looked at, where they recorded their voice. To do add recording, they click either add video or add recording, and then it's going to ask them to go ahead and start it. So they click start, and now it's recording their voice again. So they could give an example. So, para el desayuno me gusta comer huevos y pan tostado, pero a veces yo como el cereal. Yo como mi desayuno a las 7 de la mañana. Para el almuerzo yo como en la cafetería. No me gusta la blah, 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 right? So they talk about their different meals. They can stop that recording. They can listen to it.
And now it's recording their.
So they have that evidence. So they can record actual live evidence in their portfolio. Or they could add a quiz. And a quiz means it's any online activity they've completed. So when they click add quiz, it will bring up a list of all the online activities they have done. And if you notice here, we're in Unit 4. This was the can-do statement on page 215. And we can see that, oh yeah, it's right, I did that activity. I remember that one. and I got a 75 on it. So that's about, that's about right. That's about a 2 bar, and that's what I rated myself. So this is probably good evidence for that. And so I can click that piece of that activity, or that online quiz as it's called, and click add. And now you can see that's added. So I've added 3 pieces of evidence to my portfolio. And now the students need to write a reflection, and they're going to need your help as the teacher to do this. They're going to need some guidance, especially if you've never done portfolios with your students before. They may not know what to say in the reflection. So you might want to give them a couple questions to think about and to write about, or you could give them all of the questions and have them choose 1 or 2. And some of those questions, for example, might be like, why did you choose this particular evidence for this can-do statement? Why did you rank yourself a 2 for this can-do statement? What did you do well in this example? What do you want to improve on? Or maybe you might have them reflect on what do you need to do to improve. So give them some guidance on what to talk about and think about in their portfolio. And so I ranked myself a 2 bar because blah, 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 blah. So they type their reflection in. So when they're done, they click save. And it may take a while because it's uploading an audio and a large PDF and that quiz. And so now students can see what they rank themselves, and they want to change it later. They just click on that change progress. They can edit their evidence later if they want to add more evidence or delete evidence. And they can even post a comment if they want to add more information about that. Let's go in and look at the teacher view now. So if you are having your students work on portfolios, you also go in up here under the portfolio tab. We were in Spanish 1, and that was Catherine Campbell. So I'm going to see a list of all my students, and I can click whose portfolio I want to see. So I'm going to click on Catherine's. And I'm going to filter by unit 4 because that's what we're working on. Here I can see that she uploaded evidence. Teacher has not, the X means I have not made any comments, and I can see what she rated herself. I can click on it to open it up. I can see her evidence. I can click on her quiz attempt. I can open her attachment. I can listen to her audio. And then as a teacher, I can post a comment. I can upload a file for her. I can add an audio comment, or I can just type in my feedback here. You're probably not going to want to comment on every single can-do statement for every single student, but if you know a student has been struggling and working hard to improve, maybe that's one you want to go in and look at. Or maybe in your classes, you've really been working on a particular can-do statement, and you want to see how all your students self-assess themselves, see if you think they're ready for some kind of maybe a more formal assessment on it. You could go in and look at that one particular can-do statement for your students. But if you try to go in and provide feedback on all can-do statements for all students, you probably will drive yourself crazy. So don't try to do that, please. But do try to go in and look at what they are saying, what they are commenting on, and keep that in the back of your mind to help you in planning your teaching, how they feel they're doing, because their self-assessments can really help inform where you go with your lessons. Michelle, can you think of anything else about the portfolio that I haven't mentioned? Oh, I know one thing. In the teacher account, if you've never used a portfolio before and you want some more in-depth information on it, if you go to your resource folder and go to your Solo para Profesores folder, we just added this new document not too long ago called How to Use the Online Student Portfolio. So you can open that up and read a little more about it. I think it is actually one of the handouts that we attached to in the control panel there for you. But here you can also get to it through there.